Hey, my mate here, and welcome to episode 9 of my advanced tutorial series. Today I wanted to discuss with you how to research or do research on the Minecraft code to do whatever you want to do when you're creating a mod. And this episode mainly will be about events, and Palmar has discussed those a little bit when he showed how to do a GUI config handler, but he did it really briefly and like to go in depth with events. So let's get started. When you're dealing with a certain problem, you obviously have to think, how am I going to approach this problem? And in modding, usually that's by looking at the Minecraft code. So we're looking at the Forge source package, the jar right here. And Minecraft itself isn't really built for modding. Well, that's the mod API they are trying to make. But Forge and FML are the two libraries you're going to use to interface with the code. So that's mainly where you want to look. And when you look at Minecraft Forge, the package, you'll notice that there's a package called event. An event contains a lot of stuff, and the sub packages as well. When, for example, let's set up a main goal of we want to add a certain drop to a pig when you died, when it gets killed, or when it dies. You could, for example, look at the entity pig and say like, oh, when it dies, let's make it drop something. However, you don't have access to this pig, and it's Minecraft code, you can't modify it. You could make your own pig, and you could, well, replace all pigs by your own, but what if two mods do that? That wouldn't be a good solution, would it? And also, how are you going to replace all those pigs? So another thing you could do is maybe look at what happens when an entity dies. And, well, that's the same. Creatures are, by the way, hostile mobs, I think. Which is weird, because pigs aren't hostile. I'm not too sure, but entity living would be where you would be looking, and if you look at on entity death or on death, you could reverse engineer that way by looking, well, how does vanilla drop drop anything, and let's see if I can hook something into that. And hopefully there's a reference to a certain event in this I just showed. So let's go the other way around. That's usually what I'm doing. When I'm trying to do something, I often go like, well, there might be an event for that. So events really are, well, when Forge changes the Minecraft code to post an event, so it basically says to everyone who wants to know, hey, something happens, do whatever you want to do. And that event also contains all the things you need. So when an entity dies, it will give you the entity which died. And you can do things in response to that. So you could drop something close to that entity, and that way. So if you look at that, you'll see what I mean. That's just the basic thing, but entity join world event. So this is an event, and the nice thing about events is that because they're really made as a sort of an API kind of thing, the documentation on it is really good. So you can just look and you'll instantly see what they mean. It's fine when an entity joins the world. Well, that's basically all I need to know for this one. Oh, and a good thing to know is if you can cancel it or not. So when you can when you can cancel the event, you basically can nullify what this event usually would do. So entity join world implies that an entity wants to join the world, and you can do something when that happens, or you could cancel that. So basically that means that an entity won't join that world. So if you want to create a world which doesn't contain any creepers, you could do that. You could wait for that event and cancel that. There might be neater ways to do that, but just as an example. And I'll show you how to cancel events and stuff as well in a second. So there are a lot of events. Place out. You can look through the packages. There are a lot of events, and yeah. There are a lot. And in Pneumaticraft, I'm using a lot. So in this instance, there is a living death event. We could see if a entity dies and then make something drop. But because adding drops to entities is so common, Forge decided to create another event, which is called a LivingDropsEvent. There we go. So it contains all the info you need. It fired when an entity death, dropped items, and it also gives you the following info you can use to determine your own drops. So the damage source. So for example, you could make a pick drop an item when it died by an explosion, but not when it died by falling or whatever. And drops is where you want to add your drop to, which is a list, so you can just add an element to that list. A list of dropped items. And the looting level is the enchantment level of looting you've got. Recently hit. I know what it means, but I want to show you how you can determine what it means, because this might sound a little bit vague. And a special drop value. I'm not even sure about that one. I think that might. We might look at that as well. So this is a very small class. It just has a few public members you can use to do whatever. And if you look at when this class gets instantiated, I want to show you how you can do that, and you can do that by doing a call hierarchy. We've done that before, but especially when you're researching the Minecraft classes, the call hierarchy is an awesome tool. So I click that, and you can see there are two things, and two colors. And you can see one color is a player drops event, so that's basically another subclass of the LivingDropsEvent, which just is made for the player, but it's not really that interesting, I must say. But on LivingDrops, you'll see it gets called by a Forge Hooks class. Well, we can just see what calls that, and we see it's on death, on entity living base. I was close with my entity living, but it's entity living base. So you'll see that's on death. You'll see another event is called right here, Forge Hooks on living death. And you can see what Minecraft usually does when a entity dies, a living entity that is. And it determines the looting level, get looting modifier, enchantment helper, so it has to do with enchanting, right? And it's stored in I, and I, you can see that's parsed with this on LivingDrops. So indeed, this looting level is this value I. And you can see the one we weren't sure about, the recently hit one. When the entity is hit recently, well, recently hit. If you look at that, it has the documentation on that. So basically it says it's set to 60 and it decrements, well, every tick. So it's true when the entity got hit 3 seconds before it died, within 3 seconds before it died, and it's false when it's not. So with this you can basically tell if the entity died by player or just randomly. And we didn't know that by just looking at the documentation. It didn't even say the word player. So for these instances it's very nice to be able to do a call hierarchy and just research by yourself which arguments are given. And maybe we can look at this one, special drop value J. So this says if the recently hit more than 0, meaning if the player killed the entity, then depending on the looting, this is the looting value. Oh, right. So basically this J is saying which of the rare drops it should drop, I think. It has to do with those rare drops. I'm not too sure, but I don't feel like diving into that too deep. So yeah, let's use this event. I haven't shown you any, usage code. So let's do that. I don't think I can put it in any of these packages. So I'm creating a new package called event. And I'm creating a advanced event handler. There are a few ways you could split it up in every event in a different class or whatever you want. You can split it up in in entity-based events and other events. For now, I'm just doing one event class. And when you want to do an event, you just have to do public void any random name. So you can do this name doesn't matter, and then which event we want to do, which is called the LivingDropsEvent. We do LivingDropsEvent and then event. And Java can't smell it needs to call this method, so what we also need to do is add an annotation called subscribe event. And basically this tells the event handler that it should that this method is a method that it uses this event handler. So when you have a method like this, you might not want to use it like this event handling in this event handling. So that's why you also want to add this, so you can specify I want to use it, but in an event handler context. So I called it this name doesn't matter, and it doesn't really matter, but still it's good to give it a useful name. So we can do add pick drops, for example. Now this still isn't enough to make this method call when a pick drops his items. This still wouldn't be called. So you still need to register this class that it is part of a event handling. So to do this, you just need to go in your pre-init, or I'm just doing it in pre-init because it doesn't hurt. We can do it, and there are two different places where you can register your events, and that's dependent on which event you're using. For all events which are in the Minecraft Forge event package, you should use Minecraft Forge .eventbus.register, and then you just need to give it a new instance of your event handler. There we go. And now it's done. I can just to prove it, we can do log.info entity drops items. And we can run Minecraft. And we can just see if we can get it in the log. And if that works, we'll proceed. But I'm fairly sure it will work. Weather player bounce. Ooh. Grab a sword, not a golden one. Sheep. There you go, entity drops items right down there in the log. But that's for every entity, every living entity. So what we now can do, we will only want to drop something when a pig is killed. But let's just for now drop when any entity is killed. Sure, why not? So when we do event dot, we can access all members in here. So we could just add a drop. And I've shown you how to create entities, entity items even, when we did the dropping of an item when you right click a camouflage of a mine. When we do block defense mod, nope, block camo mine. There we go. So do new entity item, world XYZ, and which item stack you want to drop. So let's do that. But you don't need to do a spawn entity in world, because when you look at that event and we go to the call hierarchy and do on LivingDrops and look at that call, you'll see it will spawn all the captured drops in here. So it's doing that for you. So, the item stack we want to drop is created. What do we want to drop? Well, I don't have many items to choose from, any custom items that is. So let's drop a, well, Dutch flag, why not? And mod blocks, or yeah, Dutch flag, and that's fine. So that's the item stack we want to drop. Now we need to add that. So we need to add that to the drop. So we can do evented entity drops and add a new entity item, the world. And the world we can get from the entity because we need to drop it in the same world as the entity. Doesn't really matter if we pick entity or entity living in this case. World object, the X, Y, and the Z. So we can do entity living dot position X. We can do the position Y and position Z of that entity. So we're dropping it at the same location as the entity is at the moment. And then we are dropping the stack. And that's that. When we now go back in game, it should work already. There we go. It's dropping a Dutch flag. Nice. So to check, so to only make it drop when we kill a pig, we can do, it's quite a simple thing. We can just do entity living is an instance of entity pig. And now we kill a chicken in bone drop, but if we kill a pig, it will drop a flag. And now it's a guaranteed drop. When you kill a pig, it will always drop one Dutch flag. And you could play around with that. Obviously, you could do something like make it random. We could do, if it's an entity pick, and we can get a random instance from an entity. We could do entity living dot get RNG. There you go. And if you don't have access to any random number generator, you could always just create your own. You could just do new random. And then do a next int 3 equals 0. So it's generating a number between 0 and 2, and when it's 0 it will drop. So you've got a 1 in 3 chance that it will drop a Dutch flag. So nope. Yes. Well, that's a nice distribution. Exactly 1 in 3. Well, it dropped again. So that's really random. It dropped again, and it doesn't drop. Yeah, believe me, that will work fine. So that's the really basis on how to do events. It's really easy, actually. So there are a lot of events in the MicroForge package, but there are a few other events as well in the FML package for event. And most of those are internally or have to do with mod loading. But there are a few game events. So an input event, you can catch, like it says, mouse input and key input. And player events allows you to do a few things concerning players, and crafting and smelting, logging in and out, respawning. And tick events are the ones you probably, well, hopefully you're not having to use them that often. Sometimes you have to. So sometimes you have things where you want to do it every tick or every so often. And there aren't really events in MicroForge for that, and that's what the tick event is for. In Minecraft 1.6.4 that used to be an iTick handler. You had to register, but now it's using an event for that. And you can see there are a few different ticks. And there are wall ticks, player ticks, client ticks, server ticks, render ticks. So world ticks are both client and server side, and have to do with the wall ticks. Player ticks are ticked for every player there is. So if there are 3 players, it will be ticked thrice. And yeah, render ticks are ticked every render tick. So if you're running 60 FPS, then this will be called 60 times. And this is useful when you want to render something, or when you always want to render something. So for example, my pneumatic helmet uses this render tick event. So just for FYI, you can use this. And a good thing to note is that you need to register those events at a different event handler. So let's just do it. I'm going to do a PlayerTickEvent. Sure. And a nice thing about the PlayerTickEvent is that the player is supplied. So you could, for example, if you want to check if a player has a certain potion effect, you want to make it do something. So let's go to the event handler, do a subscribe event again. That's the same annotation you need to use. Events. And we can do player events. Player dot get commands in the name ticked. And this won't work because the let's see, call hierarchy, because this event doesn't get posted to this event bus. So that basically means that this event doesn't have to do with this event bus. It's separate. So you're listening for an event that isn't being posted on this event bus, and you can fix that because this event gets posted on a different event bus, and you can check on which one by going call hierarchy, pre-tick or post-tick, it doesn't really matter. And you can see it's posted on this bus, and it's a public thing you can get in FML Common Handler. So we can do advanced mod FML Common Handler instance bus and register new advanced mod event handler. Doesn't really matter if you're using the same instance or a different instance in this case. And now it should work. Oh, and there we go. We get all kinds of spam saying that a player ticked. And if we do an enter, you'll see that I'm the player that's ticking. And you also see that it's called on both client and server. So you need to make sure that when you're probably doing things, because again the server decides what's being done. You probably want to check if it's on the server side, and you can do a board object check on the history mode, or I could just do event.site equals site.server. And now you'll notice that it's only called on the server. But it's actually called 40 times per second. The reason is phase. There you go. So it says start and end, and that's because most tick events have a pre and a post state. So pre is before something ticks, and post is after something ticks. So for example, a render tick event will be called pre before anything is rendered, so you can do rendering of whatever, I don't know. And post is being called after everything is rendered, and you usually want to do that. You want to render after everything it has rendered already. And for player ticks, the same. We can just look. If you do pre-tick on updates, so at the very top of the ticking of the player entity, it will do a pre-tick, and if we go down, you'll see at the bottom there is a post-tick. So that's after the player has ticked. So that's good to keep in mind. Often it doesn't really matter which one you pick, but it does matter that you just pick one. So you do something like event.face equals tick event.face.start or end. And now it will only be called on the tick end. So, with that out of the way, I think I can conclude this episode, really. This was episode 9 on my advanced modding tutorial series. I hope you learn a lot, because events are really useful and I'm using those a lot. And they gave you a lot of insight on how the Minecraft code is working, and it has a lot of documentation on it, so it's really nice to learn from. Hope you enjoyed it. See you all next time, and bye bye.